Welcome to Crime Most French, a weekly podcast taking you through intriguing cases carried out on French soil. Researched and narrated by Cedric and rudely interrupted by me, Melanie. We're the true crime podcast All the Lions. Crack open le vin and let the mayhem commence.
The case this week takes us to the mid to late 1920s. We are following the case of Dr. Pierre Laget, who became one of the first referenced serial killers in France. Pierre Laget was born on the 11th of July 1885 in Gignac. Gignac is close to the coast on the Mediterranean, between Montpellier and Marseille, close to Béziers.
So, Languedoc.
Languedoc, yes. He was a brilliant kid who did very well at school. He eventually studies medicine and becomes a dentist in 1909 at age 24. And he opens his own practice in Béziers town centre.
So he's not your archetypal, had a horribly deprived childhood. He's more of the Ted Bundy, quite a comfortable childhood, well looked after, did well at school kind of thing.
Yes, there's nothing that could have made you think that he would turn into a serial killer at all. He did well, he was a good kid, he never did anything wrong. Nobody expected what we are going to talk about.
Mm-hmm. So definitely nature, not nurture.
I guess so, yes. Although you could also argue it's nurture more than nature. We'll see why. In 1911, at age 26, he meets Sarah Alexander, Peter Serafinovic's wife. She's the heiress to a local rich family.
Okay.
And her father is the owner of the building where his practice is installed. So that's how they meet. They meet at a party in that building. She's young, she's beautiful, she's intelligent, and Pierre Laget decides that she would make a good wife. Mm-hmm. So they start seeing each other, they hit it off pretty well, and they get married in 1912. And it's in a big ceremony because at the time the father of the bride was financing the wedding and he was rich.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it's all sounding all happy and rosy so far.
Yes.
Not very typical for our podcasts.
Yes. They have 3 kids, Jacqueline, who dies very young, and they have 2 sons, Jean and Gaston.
Okay.
In 1914, at 29, war was declared.
Yeah.
So he's called to serve. He's wounded on the 31st of August 1914.
Okay.
But he survives and recovers. The wound, which was to his foot, is later considered a bit fishy.
Oh, yes.
Because when you're in a trench, how do you get shot in the foot?
Well, not unless you're walking around on your hands.
Yes, exactly. So not at the time, but later people start thinking...
Self-inflicted.
Yeah. He's wounded the second time as he was serving as a reservist. So he was several miles behind the front line. Mm-hmm. This time it's at the abdomen. And again, people are asking, how do you get shot to the abdomen miles behind the front line? Mm. And his answer at the time was, well, that's stray bullets.
I guess so.
I guess so, yeah.
Really stray bullets.
Yeah. That's extremely unlucky at that point.
Ricocheting off of lots of things on the way.
Yes, a cartoon style. But again, he gets a medal for it, and that's pretty much it. People stop talking about it. Mm-hmm. After the end of the war in 1918, he goes back to his pre-war life, but things are not going very well with the wife.
Oh dear.
Things are not well with his patients either, because he tends to be late to appointments or not show up, or he's losing patients like crazy. So the practice is not going well. I think I saw a number at some point. He was making several 100,000 francs a year from his practice, and by 1920, I don't remember which year, he was doing 10,000.
Oh, wow.
So he more than divided by 10 what he was making.
Okay, so that's one whole order of magnitude down.
Yeah. So his practice went from very profitable, very well respected, to not working at all and essentially not making money. Also, when he's not seeing patients to kill the time, I guess, he sees women in his office.
Oh dear.
And when it's not women, he gambles and therefore loses even more money.
Really, all you have to throw in there is the drink, isn't it, for it to be the trivector?
Gambling. It is not At the trial, they don't mention that he's drinking, but
Yeah.
I've seen one mention that he was drinking. Who was it? I can't remember if it was a patient or a relative. Somebody mentioned that he was drinking, but it doesn't seem to have been
No.
bad enough that people were talking about it or justifying things with it. Sarah discovers Pierre's double life fairly quickly, and that starts lots of arguments. At first, they're in private, but then they end up being in front of family.
Oh dear.
Noemi, who's one of Sarah's sisters, and her husband George are often witnesses because they must live close by. They usually end up calming Sarah and convincing her not to divorce. That's usually how it happens.
I guess a divorce would have been a bit scandalous at that time, so they probably are trying to do it for the family's reputation.
It would have been, yes, probably, yes. Although she was rich, so I don't know, it might have been
A bit more
not
tolerated.
not such a big problem. But anyway, we're going now to talk about the first suspicious death, so you know where that's going, I'm guessing. One morning, Pierre Laget falls ill. She can't get out of bed and she vomits everything she eats.
Oh, poor woman.
The doctors that are called to see her have absolutely no clue what's happening to her, and they end up blaming cancer, which at the time was some kind of magical illness that nobody could explain, nobody could cure. So if you don't know what it is, it must be cancer.
A good catch-all.
It's a good catch-all, yeah. Even if all they knew is that when you have cancer, often you vomit. That's pretty much why they decided, okay, she's vomiting, it must be cancer. Pierre is not worried when his wife is ill.
Nice.
And he says that he's helping with tisane, so he gives her tea, herbal tea. It doesn't really help Sarah, and she dies on the 20th of May, 1922.
Now, I'm a big herbal tea fan, but I'm really doubtful that it would help cure cancer.
Yeah. Or anything.
Yes.
George, Pierre's brother-in-law, Noemi's sister, has some suspicions to his family, the Exxon family.
Okay.
He's wondering if Pierre was somehow involved in Sarah's death, especially since it is discovered very quickly that Sarah had recently written a will, and in which she leaves 262,000 francs to her children.
Okay.
But until they're adults, which at the time would have been 21, their father has access to that money.
And time to rip through it, gambling, no doubt.
Yes, so we've been to the school of Provenza, and we know that it's always the husband, always the husband, always the husband, and also follow the money.
Oh, yeah.
And they both point to one dude. But weirdly, the police is not interested. Nobody investigates anything. Nobody asks questions outside George. And that's it. That's the end of the story for Sarah.
I wonder if that's a case of it's a high-profile, wealthy family, so you don't want to upset any apple carts and just turn a blind eye.
Yeah, but at the same time, if it's a wealthy family, they tend to want to solve murders. So, because if you're a young, poor black dude, for example, most likely your murder is not going to interest anyone. But a young, rich woman, people are going to be interested to know what happened. But somehow, no.
I think a lot of families, though, just didn't like the upset of, having the police sniffing around about their affairs.
Could be. I didn't find any explanation for why the police wasn't interested in looking at it as a crime.
No.
It just didn't happen.
Oh, the paperwork.
It didn't make it to the papers at that point.
Oh, right, okay.
The story only appeared in the paper at the trial.
Okay.
So years later, at that point, there's nothing, no mention of anything.
So we're thinking, or I'm right in thinking this isn't going to be the first death.
No, there will be a number of them.
Okay.
Pierre, who's now a widower, doesn't take long to get over his wife's death. A few months later, at the end of 1922, he decides to take a new wife.
A few months? Wow.
Yes.
That was quick.
Yeah, it was fairly quick, yeah. And he decides on Susan. Susan being Sarah's sister.
Oh, all in the family.
Yeah. I don't know if it was that common at the time or more common than today, but in my family I've seen that happen as well. I've seen several members of families marrying their other half sister, brother after they died. So I even have a woman who married a dude, then his brother, and then his cousin.
Wow, okay.
So I don't know how common it was at the time, but I suspect it was fairly common, so it probably wouldn't have shocked anyone that he married the sister. But that being said, the family is not happy about it because they know Pierre now. He's not like a new a new person they don't know. Now they know what happened to his first wife.
And he's a failing doctor who's got a gambling habit that likes women.
Exactly. So the family is not keen on it, but eventually they accept that they're going to get married. And the father pays the dowry, which is 300,000 francs.
Wow, that must have been a lot of money back then.
A
lot of money now.
Yeah, it's probably €500,000 or something like that. So it's a good dowry. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It goes straight to Pierre's bank account.
Of course it does. And then goes straight to Pierre's bookies, no doubt.
I don't know if he had bookies at the time, but I heard that his gambling was stock market, and when that wasn't satisfying, he would go and do casinos. So I don't know if there was any bookie involved.
You would have thought the stock market in the 20s, right up until a certain point, was reasonably an easy bet.
I have no idea. I don't know. Before 1929, I really know nothing about the stock market.
No.
So. In 1923, Pierre is getting ready to be married to Susan. His aunt dies. You'd think that at that point, that's starting to be a lot of death around him, but nobody's interested. The police doesn't look at it, and everybody says, she was old, that's fine, she just died. So that's never properly investigated. We don't even know what she died of. Okay. We have no idea. But that's the second person close to him who dies. On the 26th of January 1924, Pierre and Susan get married, and they have a daughter soon after called Micheline.
Okay.
My grandfather's sister was called Micheline. Pierre enjoys the newfound fortune, and one of the first things he does after his marriage is to buy a giant villa, and it's mentioned several times at the trial.
So he's living at large. Yeah.
And he's not happy with just one giant villa, he buys lots of houses. So he spends the dowry in houses.
Well, it's probably...
it's safer than stock market, yeah. That's pretty much all you can say about it.
You might not get a good return, especially as the housing market... Well, today the housing market in France is very stable, but I don't know what it was like in the 20s.
Well, it probably was, and it's always been. So he's spending like a footballer's wife, and within 3 years, at the end of 1928, he has no money left. He's ruined.
Skint.
Yeah. So it took him three years to spend about €500,000.
Wow. And that's with buying big villas.
And it's buying big villas, yes.
Wow. And down there as well, it would be pricey.
I don't know if they would have been at the time. I have no idea.
Had the Parisians not discovered...
No, that would have been later because the...
Riviera.
Yeah, the paid holidays was 1936. Before that, only the rich could really go on holiday.
Yeah.
So it was a very small amount of people. So I wouldn't think that it was really that sought after at the time.
No. I mean, Coco Chanel made tans popular in the 20s.
Yeah.
Probably from going down there, but as you say,
but for the rich.
Super wealthy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I don't think it would have been really a good investment, but at least it wouldn't have lost value.
Not like now. I mean, you're talking a big villa down there.
That would be expensive now.
Yeah, that's Cluny, gazumping.
Yeah, that's not that far. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So suddenly, in early 1929, Susan falls ill. So we know where that's going again.
She's not got lots of vomiting, has she, by any chance?
The symptoms are very close to Sarah's symptoms a few years earlier.
Yeah, all the flags, all the klaxons.
Yep. So she suffers for months. She loses her sight.
Oh my God.
She doesn't talk anymore.
That's savage.
And she eventually dies on the 12th of April 1929. So she took about 4 months to die.
Oh, that is just cruel. That is just sadistic. That is evil. That is just pure unadulterated evil. And
when people look at it a bit too closely for comfort, Pierre explains it saying it has to be a hereditary thing.
A hereditary thing, yeah.
It's in the family. That's it.
That's the only explanation. Genes.
Yeah, bad genes on that side. That's just what happened. The Exxon family finds Pierre's attitude a bit strange.
That's horrifying.
Yes. Also, once again, they discover that there's some money story behind it.
Of course there is.
Apparently, as soon as they got married with Susan, he subscribed to a life insurance policy. And if she came to die, he would pocket 100,000 francs.
Do you know, I'm beginning to think that all life insurance should actually come with a clause of, please sign this knowing this will help incriminate you kill someone later on down the line.
Well, I think all life insurance should be reported to the police and say, you have a potential murderer here.
Yes. Just keep an eye on this guy.
Yes.
Woman.
So once again, the dentist doesn't take very long to get over his grief. By August 1929, so we are talking 4 months or so, he announces that he's ready to get married again.
He rebounds fast.
Yeah, yeah. This time he says he wants to do good and he's going to get married to one of his mistresses. One of the women that came to see him in his practice when customers weren't coming.
Yeah.
But his sister, so not the Alexander family, his
Blood
sister,
family this time, yeah.
Mary Louise, is opposed to the marriage. She doesn't want a third marriage on that side of the family.
Especially not with a mistress, presumably.
Probably not with a mistress, yeah. That was probably even worse. And also, she's pestering him because she lent him 172,000 francs a few years earlier, and she wants the money back, and he doesn't want to pay it back.
I just can't get over how much money this guy
spends.
He
burns money like crazy.
And he's like a woman.
Yeah. In the trial, his lawyer at some point said that he wasn't doing it for money because his wealth was estimated at several millions at some point. But by the time of the trial, he had zero. So that money went somewhere.
Yeah. Wow.
Plus, if you add all the money he borrowed or stole, that's a shitload of money that he managed to burn. Yeah. So they have arguments, which are more or less public. And guess what?
Well, she doesn't fall ill, does she?
A few days after an argument, Mary Louise falls ill. Late August 1929.
Oh dear. Maybe keep away from your brother.
Yes, and that happens just after she spent a few days on holiday with her brother at his house. She has a cough and she doesn't feel well. Pierre, again, is not worried. Of
course not.
Tea is going to solve the problem. And Mary Louise's doctors think that it might be food poisoning. And she recovers. So for everybody, confirms that, it was probably food poisoning. There's nothing to worry about.
But she's leaving the sphere of his influence. She's not living with him.
On the 25th of December 1929, she falls ill again. Again, she had been on holiday with her brother.
Yeah, big family holiday.
So
did he make the stuffing?
Yeah, probably. I think it is mentioned in the trial. He cooked the meal. Yeah.
Yes. Oh, and here's your special plate. It has an extra added ingredient.
Yes, it's made with love. She fights back. She's ill until January 1930.
Okay.
She suffers for about 4 weeks of symptoms that were very close to Susan's and Sarah's again.
Yeah, There you go. She must have caught the cancer from just being around about the husband.
Yeah. She calls her own doctors, and despite their attempts, the illness seems to gain ground. The doctors are Rouleau and Pagès. They decide to hospitalize her at the end of January 1930 because there's just nothing they can do when she's at home. And at that point, she loses hair by the handful and she constantly bleeds from the nose.
Oh, God. That's never a good sign.
And whatever you do is never a good sign, no. When you start bleeding from places you shouldn't bleed, yeah. On the 1st of February 1930, the doctor, Rouleau, one of his doctors, advises the Exxon family to put Mary Louise in a specialized institution, and he forbids any visit from Pierre. And he says, if you don't do that, I will not look after your daughter. I don't want the responsibility of looking after her if she stays at home.
Yeah.
Because he's starting to think that something is dodgy with the brother. He doesn't clearly say it, as far as I know, but he's starting to think, every time she goes on the holiday with him, she's ill.
There's a correlation.
And it's bad. Yeah. So, he's starting to see some link between the two. In only 2 days, without contact with Pierre, she feels a lot better.
Oh, quelle surprise.
Yeah. And she tells her doctor that lately, nearly every day, Pierre came for tea in the afternoon. And she also admits that every time he leaves, she feels worse.
You think she might have noticed?
Yes. So again, the doctor talks to the family and to her, and he convinces her to press charges against Pierre.
Yeah, quite.
And the Exxon family, so his ex-wife's family, joins in because they also think, that could be what happened to our daughters.
Yeah.
On the 10th of February 1930, he's arrested and he's sent to jail awaiting trial. Of course, he claims he's innocent, because they all do. And many people believe him because even though his practice went down the drain, people still respect him as a dentist in town, in Béziers. So there's crazy rumors going around town at that point. One of them being, for example, that Marie-Louise had an affair with a married man who gave her syphilis and made her pregnant. And in fact, when Pierre was giving her something, which was probably arsenic, he was trying to solve the problem by inducing an abortion and curing the syphilis.
My God, what a gent.
That's exactly what people say. And because of that, she has to go through a whole bunch of medical tests to prove that rumor and other rumors are false. And when the test results come back, it turns out that she's not pregnant. She's never been pregnant. She doesn't have syphilis. She never had syphilis. And she was indeed poisoned by arsenic.
So not only does she have to go through virtually almost dying because she's been poisoned, she's had her name completely trashed.
Yes, exactly. And she had to prove that she was innocent, not him.
Yeah. Oh, but when there's smoke, there's fire. I'm sure once the name was cleared, it was never really truly cleared. You know what people are like.
Especially the countryside, yes.
Yes.
Also, the tests show that the quantities of arsenic acid they find in her urine explain the fact that she was poisoned over a very long period of time.
So once again, very drip feeding, not all of
it's not a one-off thing. She was poisoned many, many, many times.
Yeah, this guy is a monster.
Yes. She was poisoned, in fact, enough times that her body learned to process arsenic.
Wow. Much like a junkie needs higher hits. Then,
Yeah. So a few days later, on the 14th of February 1930, the bodies of Sarah and Susan are exhumed because now the police is starting to think that maybe there is something to it. Pierre, who was there at the time at the cemetery, observes, and people say that he had absolutely no feeling whatsoever. He was just there watching. And that at that point, some people started to have questions because it's not the behavior of somebody who has his two ex-wives being exhumed.
That's psychopath.
That is psychopath territory, yes. The conclusion of the tests is that Susan was indeed poisoned with arsenic.
Okay, she was the second wife, wasn't she?
She was the second wife, and she was poisoned the same way the sister was.
Mm-hmm.
The tests on Sarah are inconclusive because she had been decomposing for too long at that point, and they couldn't extract anything useful.
So she doesn't get her justice, but the sister does.
Yeah. And Pierre is sent back to jail.
Good.
In April 1930... his aunt's body is also exhumed because at that point the police is starting to look at all the deaths around him, and they found a lot, and they want to know how these people died.
Yeah.
And it turns out that, again, because it was 7 years earlier, the aunt's body has decomposed too much and they can't get anything out of it. So again, we will never know what she died of. On the 3rd of June 1931, Pierre is judged in Montpellier at the tribunal for the murder of his two wives and the poisoning of his sister. The aunt is not mentioned at that point. Okay. He claims his innocence the whole time, but he looks cold, and his attitude, where he essentially doesn't consider himself involved in a way in the story, fascinates the public. So it makes it to the newspapers, and that's how I got information out of it. Mm-hmm. It's even worse than that. Not only it doesn't seem to be really that worried about what happened to his wives and why he's there, he even claims that the victims poisoned themselves by stealing arsenic from his office.
Yeah, because who hasn't heard tales of all those countless numbers of people slowly poisoning themselves over a long period of time in a horribly painful death?
Exactly.
They never use pills and booze or shoot themselves in the face. They poison themselves. Nobody poisons themselves.
Especially not with arsenic. That's probably one of the worst things you can use to poison yourself. It's terrible death.
It's such an archetypal Victorian lady way of killing.
Yeah, because it was easy to find, not because it was fast.
Yeah, it's because it was in rat poison.
It was in rat poison, yeah. But there were some much better ways of poisoning people that were faster and better, but harder to find.
Not as easy to trace.
Yeah. During the trial, we learned that the good doctor requested curare from some of his colleagues when he came back from the war, and one of them, Dr. Petch, was really surprised by that request because, as far as he knew, the only use of curare is to kill people. There's absolutely no other medical use. I
just have an image of him across in his office trying to put up the blow dart of this curare into his patient's neck. Why would anybody need that?
That's the thing. That's what the other doctor thinks.
Yeah.
He's really worried about what he could possibly want to do with that. And when he's asked about it, Dr. Laget says he's been at the war for 4 years. He just wants to catch up with the advances of medical science. So one of the things he was interested in is poisons. So he's asking for poison from other people.
Poisons that tribes use has got nothing to do with medical advancement. That's just nonsense.
Yeah. Another trial, he says, why would I ask for curare to kill people? Because that leaves traces. It's easy to spot when somebody's been poisoned by curare. Maybe not old women.
Yeah.
He actually says that at the tribunal. That maybe curare would be suitable for old women.
Yeah. And then everybody takes a large step back and goes...
That surprised everybody when he said that, according to newspapers. The Dr. Petch also mentions that his colleagues consider him unstable and prone to sadism.
I think...
So that was his reputation among other doctors.
Yeah, we can kind of see that.
Yeah.
And now I have an image of the dentist in Little Shop of Horrors.
Pierre denies everything, of course. He denies that he had a gambling problem, and he even denies that he had mistresses. And when he's asked about that, he says, well, show me all my mistresses. And of course, none of them is in the tribunal. Why would they be in the tribunal?
And who's going to want to admit to being a monstrous mistress?
So that's the show me what I've done.
Yeah.
And until then, I'm innocent. When he's presented the findings of the doctors that have been charged by the tribunal to go over all the reports for all the illnesses of his wives and sister, he denies. He says that all the reports mention a lot of it seems and it appears, and that is not conclusive accusation. Of course, that's the way all scientific papers are written. You never say in a scientific paper, this is the way it is. No. You say, we think that's the way it could be. And this is why we think it could be that way. Yeah. It's never, you can't rule out that something's wrong or you forgot something or missed something.
It's probable rather than it's certain.
It's highly probable that this is that way. But of course, he plays on the fact that people don't know that by saying, they don't say she was poisoned. They say, it seems that she was poisoned.
Yeah, he has a level of intellect to try and add a shadow of a doubt, but it's...
Yeah, that's what he's trying to do. And even when the doctors point out that they found 30 centigrams of arsenic acid in Mary Louise's urine, which means that not only she was poisoned over a long time, and she was poisoned with increasing doses, and her body got used to it. He says, that doesn't prove it's me. So the judge asks him, are you suggesting that Mary Louise was poisoned at a hospital? And his answer to that was, how do I know? Maybe she tried to commit suicide. Which makes absolutely no sense with the evidence, because if she had tried to commit suicide, she would have poisoned herself once. Yes. Not over months and months.
You would have to have some serious level of self-loathing to go yourself that way.
And cherry on the cake, towards the end of the trial, he even tries to accuse his mum of having killed his ex-wives by saying that, for example, when Marie-Louise was poisoned at Christmas, only 2 other people were in the house with Marie-Louise. It was him and his mum, and clearly it wasn't him, so that must have been his mum.
Oh my God, so throw Mama under the bus.
Exactly. That's the kind of gentleman he is.
Yeah.
The judges don't take it seriously at all. No. They don't believe for a second that the victims poisoned themselves or his mum tried to do it. So they found him guilty of murder for his second wife.
Good.
Poisoning of his sister. And they acquit him for the murder of his first wife on lack of evidence.
Oh, that's sad.
He's sentenced to death.
Yay! Off with his head.
He appeals, but his appeal is rejected on the 19th of September 1931.
Good.
Now, unfortunately for him, the President of the Republic, who was called Paul Doumer at the time, decides on the 29th of September 1931, so 10 days later, to pardon him.
Okay.
He had told his lawyer after the end of the trial that he preferred to be killed than spending his days in prison. Unfortunately, spending his days in prison is what's going to happen to him.
Oh, good. Well, in that case, if he wanted to be guillotined and he isn't, then yay.
Yeah. And guess where he goes? He goes to Guyana again.
He's got the one-way ticket to Papillon.
Yep. He goes there in October 1931, and he serves there as a doctor. A nurse, not a doctor. Okay. In 1938, he obtains a reduction of sentence to 20 years of hard labor instead of life of hard labor.
Well, okay.
For good behavior, apparently. So I guess if you're not one of his victims, he might be an okay guy. That's pretty much what that tells you.
If you're not married to him and you don't have lots of money, but you're safe enough around about him, I guess.
Exactly. And he commits suicide in 1944 with poison. And he leaves a letter to explain that he just can't take it anymore. He can't continue being labeled a murderer, so he prefers to kill himself.
Oh, wow.
And that is the end of the Dr. Laget story.
And I think it shows all of us that sometimes it is not safe to open wide and go,